What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Lombardi Time Brews. I'm your host, John Delray. Today, we're going through shout-outs and get-outs from the Packers' Week 3 victory over the Tennessee Titans. And like last week, I'm not going to lie, there's a lot more shout-outs than there are get-outs. So we're going to dive into that. Now, as I say with every video that's under this theme, it's not necessarily every single player did great things, because I don't want to have the person in the comments be like, you didn't say this one, gotcha. Like, no. This is the things that stood out the most to me with the shout outs, and then also the things that weren't so good. And yeah, even in a very good victory for the Green Bay Packers yesterday, there were a couple of things that just have to get improved upon, because as I'm going to talk about in a little bit, if you do some of that stuff against better competition, it eventually will cost you. So we're going to get to that last. Let's start off with the good news. And so that happens to be number one shout out has to go Matt LaFleur, Malik Willis. I mean, look, they put up 23 offensive points with their backup in the game. And this is the second week in a row that Malik Willis has been one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the league. And it's not even with his arm only. He led the team in rushing yesterday with 73 rushing yards as well. Even going beyond just the basic box score stuff, I found two tweets that are so emblematic of just how good Malik Willis was. One was from Wes Hockowitz, the actual Packers beat reporter, who put out, Malik Willis is the fifth quarterback in Packers history to have a 120-plus passer rating in consecutive starts. Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre, Jordan Love, and Lynn Dickey. Yeah, I'm tweeting that because Lynn Dickey is involved in the stat. That's what Wes put there. But now Malik Willis belongs in that incredible company of Packers quarterbacks. Or how about this one from Philippe? There are only 3 quarterbacks with at least 45 dropbacks and a 0.0% turnover-worthy play rate. Malik Willis, Aaron Rodgers, and Justin Fields. What a weird list. You expect exactly one of those individuals to find themselves on that list, and it's a former Green Bay quarterback. Justin Fields, he never got there while he was playing in Chicago. Malik Willis certainly never got there when he was playing in Tennessee, but that is the way that he is playing now. So I talked in the pregame show about how it was going to be so necessary, because you can't just roll out the exact same game plan that you did against Indianapolis. Tennessee is a far superior run defense team than that of the Indianapolis Colts. And we did see that at times. Like if you were at the watch party, you know, those runs up the middle that went for 0 or 1 or -1. There were a lot of them for the Green Bay Packers. And it's because the Tennessee Titans are a very legit run defense team. So we talked about how Malik Willis is going to have to throw the ball more. The playbook is going to have to be opened up at least a little bit. And LaFleur did it. If you want to get really picky, you could talk about there was kind of a lull at about the mid-game point there for the Packers offense, but ultimately it just never became debilitating. The Packers offense was so efficient yesterday. So good. And it even goes beyond just the passing attack. And LaFleur is absolutely involved in this next component as well. So shout out number 2 goes to the rushing attack. See, Theo Ash found this incredible stat, saying the Packers have 612 rushing yards so far this season. Per True Media, that's the 4th most through 3 weeks of any team since 2000. Number 1, the 2006 Falcons was 675. Number 2, the 2019 Ravens 650. Number 3, the 2013 Eagles 627. Number 4, your Green Bay Packers 2024 612 yards. And that comes in after a game where Josh Jacobs has every right to be incredibly frustrated. Yesterday, sure, week 2, he was the hero against the Colts, but yesterday was not as strong of a game in the box score for him. It was a frustrating game. He had a bunch of his longest runs negated by penalties, which we'll absolutely be talking about penalties in just a few minutes. But it still be pointed out that even in amongst a 43-yard performance for Josh Jacobs, he still was PFF's highest graded runner on the team, just barely edging out Emmanuel Wilson. But the culmination of the whole attack, factoring in Malik Willis' 73 yards rushing as well, which led the team, brings them to being one of the top running teams in the NFL. And there's just no way you could have said to me before the season started, hey, even with Jordan Love missing 2 games, after 3 weeks, you're going to be the best running team in the NFL. No way. Even with Josh Jacobs, no way. It's not the way the Packers are built. It's not what they do. Yet, here we are. And let's talk about Emmanuel Wilson, as the NFL Twitter account called him yesterday. He certainly looked better than a replacement level back. As Rob Domofsky on ESPN pointed out, those 26 snaps for Wilson yesterday happened to be a career high. It's almost as much as he had the first 2 weeks combined, and his first NFL touchdown happened to come on that 30-yard screen, where he forced multiple missed tackles. We talked a lot about who's going to be the number one wide receiver, and maybe it doesn't matter because it's going to be the culmination of all of them. Their running attack is kind of the same thing, and it's just we didn't really predict that. All right, so now let's flip the script. Let's go over to the defensive side of the ball, and this is just, I'm going to lump them together, but the truth is, Xavier McKinney, Jair Alexander, both deserve shout-outs. Picks for everybody. Let me just shift this around here, but this is Xavier McKinney's interception. And just watch the amount of field that he covers. This clip was from Jacob Morley on Twitter. Here it is. So you can see, Levis takes the snap, and just watch. There's McKinney. The amount of space that he covers in order to get his third interception in as many games. I've said it every single week that he's been a Packer. But he is exactly as advertised. We believed that the Packers were getting one of the best safeties in the NFL per all of the numbers. Even though he played on a crappy Giants team, per all the numbers, he was going to be one of the best safeties in the NFL. They paid up for him. They got him, and he's just doing it. There's no question. Through 3 weeks, he's been one of the best safeties in the NFL. 17 tackles, 3 interceptions, and only a 28.1 QB rating when targeted. As for Jair, different area of the secondary, it was his first career pick six, one that he read like a book, and he's now covering an awful lot, like prime Jair Alexander. He was seen mixing it up on several run plays yesterday. He did not miss a tackle in 4 tackle attempts yesterday, which you cannot always say about Jair. But then, predominantly lining up against Calvin Ridley, Jair Alexander, per PFF, posted a 90 coverage grade. That is prime Jair Alexander. He allowed a measly 48.8 QB rating when targeted. Through 3 games, that QB rating when targeted is only 79.9, which would be the 3rd lowest rating allowed in Jair's career. If there are doubts about him being back, we could begin to put them to the side. All right, so next one, let's move up. Let's get to the bigger guys on the defense, and let's just lump this all under one, the pass rush. Yeah, because Kingsley Enagbare, you, sir, are a monster. Just flip over to this clip. Just watch him go. It's almost comical. And then LVN literally army crawling across another human being. Just watch it again. He beats Petitfrere in under 2 seconds to get to Levis, and then he just doesn't hit Levis. He destroys Levis to get the ball knocked out. LVN then getting over the top to get that ball. Just a comical, purely beastful sack for Kingsley Enagbare. But then also, let's take a look at this one too for Devontae Wyatt. Completely different. That one posted by the actual NFL Twitter account. But, I mean, a completely different format. Let's watch it again. Kingsley Enagbare's was blow right past him, get there in 2 seconds. Here, the coverage is good downfield. Levis has to step in the pocket, and Devontae Wyatt just doesn't give up. He eventually pushes his offensive lineman straight into Levis, making the play. And like I talked about, cumulative efforts when it comes to the running back position, cumulative efforts when it comes to the wide receiver position, the pass rush yesterday was so much the same way. Multiple sacks per PFF for Preston Smith, Wyatt getting multiple, Enagbare getting multiple, Adrian Cooper being involved in one, LVN being involved in one. They were all productive. And yet, they were that level of productive without Rashawn Gary filling up the box score and without Kenny Clark filling up the box score. We talked a little bit about Kenny Clark last week, kind of falling into some of the more negative categories of this, and he didn't do a whole lot. in this game to really reverse course. Rashawn Gary, he had a sack that was negated by a penalty, and he helped, certainly, you can see it plain as day, he helped set up some of these other sack that occurs, but he personally, he didn't fill up the box score. No, it was everyone, literally everyone else that is a pass rusher. And there's also a lot of credit due here for defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley. Because as people pointed out in the watch party yesterday, as Matt LaFleur even said in his press conference today, some of those blitzes by Hafley were incredibly well timed. But also, not just the timing of which, but the usage of which. The NASCAR package, or as we deemed it yesterday in the watch party, the Four Horsemen package. When you're going up against one of the league's worst pass blocking offensive lines, which, by the way, they're going to do again this coming weekend against Minnesota. But when you're going up against one of the league's worst pass blocking offensive lines, doesn't it make sense to get some of your best pass rushers on the field? What other way do you do that than just lining up 4 defensive ends? Yeah, that's what that NASCAR package is. It's getting Enigbare, LVN, Rashawn Gary, and Preston Smith as the 4 individuals on the defensive line, and then just let them go feast. That kind of package doesn't work all the time, but yesterday, it most certainly did. And it's really, really fun to watch. I said before this game that if they weren't productive, then okay, we're going to have some conversations about this pass rush just not working. And after the first quarter, looked like those conversations were going to occur. But with the way the game ended, once they unleashed, no, not a worry against that Titans O-line at the very least. So, all right, let's move on to a couple of meh at this point. Things that weren't necessarily bad, things that weren't necessarily great, but things that just kind of happened. And let's focus in on Rasheed Walker. Sheed, buddy, the penalties. It's just too many. 5 in only 3 games to this point. More than almost any other tackle in the NFL. And it's, he said, maybe one of the reasons why I'm a little extra troubled about this is because he actively said at his locker before the Tennessee game, this was last week, he talked about how the refs are really zeroing in on him. They're really, emphasizing holding calls, etc. And he seemed to defer a lot of why he's getting holding calls on them, not him. Look, Shade, some little ticky-tack, but some of those holding penalties, man, it is you. And that's not great. But the thing is, from Rasheed Walker, it's not nearly all bad. He's got a pass blocking grade of 79.8, and he allowed only 1 pressure yesterday. So it's not even close to all bad. His run blocking needs work. It's always needed some work. We can say that. But he got handed the left tackle job because he and Tom, by the end of last year, formed one of the best pass blocking duos at tackle in the NFL. And Sheed, when he's not flagged, is holding up his end of that billing. But he has got to clean up those penalties. Still a very, very promising young player. Still someone that they can roll out there. He's more than serviceable. But can't keep killing plays because he's just handsy. It's got to stop. The other not great, not bad. Braden Narveson. Narv and the special teams bunch. The box score shows Braden Narveson had a perfect day. His first perfect day as a Green Bay Packer, actually. But he did miss one. It just happened to not count because of a penalty. I really, really like the way that he kicks. But it looks natural. The ball kind of flies off his foot. It's a lot of really promising stuff. But had he not been bailed out by a penalty, that would be 3 straight games with a miss. And it's definitely less than ideal. So let's now turn the page and let's go to the get outs. Stuff that's really not good. Yeah, let's talk red zone offense. I covered in the game preview how the Packers have been lackluster in the red zone. Well, it somehow got worse against the Titans. Green Bay only converted 1 of their 3 opportunities against the Tennessee Titans in the red zone. And I mean converted into touchdowns. We're not counting field goals here because in a red zone offense, you want touchdowns. And the Packers are not getting touchdowns in the red zone. Both drives that stalled out and resulted in Braden Narveson field goals were within the 10-yard line, which is like the number 1 place you don't want to have your offense stall out, right? And yet it did. It's only 1 of 3 yesterday. That 1 for 3 performance happens to push their season percentage down to only 30% on the season. Good for 29th in the NFL. And if you happen to look up where there are some really pretty bad teams that are above them in that ranking. It's just an area, and it goes week 1, they weren't good there either. It was predominantly because of execution. Love wasn't great in the red zone in week 1. Guys were slipping and sliding. Watson couldn't get to the ball in week 1 because Love overthrew it a bit. Like, it's not just, we're going to look at this and say, well, I got a backup quarterback in. What do you expect? No, the entirety over the 3 weeks, the Green Bay Packers have been bad in the red zone. And it's something that just has to get cleaned up. If you want to point at one thing right now for LaFleur, the game plan, the offense on the whole, and really just stomp on the flowers that they do rightly deserve, then this is probably the ire that deserves the point. And the last thing we're going to talk about today, penalties. Green Bay is currently 28th in the NFL in penalties per game at 8.7. Yesterday, 10. They've survived them thus far, but the reality is it's going to catch up to them against better teams. I think we all can agree on that. Preston's offsides. That was a play that should have ended the Tennessee drive and forced them to kick a field goal. Instead, though, they were allowed to continue their drive and they turned it into a touchdown. It's basically a 4-point penalty. Now, if you don't want to be that drastic about it, you can argue that, well, the defense should have stopped them from getting a touchdown anyway. Yeah, sure. Penalty where you line up wrong also shouldn't happen. So let's call it a 4-point penalty. Then you have Josh Jacobs. It just felt like at least through 3 quarters of the game, anytime Josh Jacobs got a good chunk run of 8, 10 plus yards, you just had to wait because he would go dashing down the field and then you would just see on the telecast a little flag thing come right up above. It felt predetermined. And Gary getting a sack negated by a penalty too. These are big plays that suddenly just don't count. And it's not just the sheer number of penalties, it's who getting them. Preston, Kenny, Elton with 2 penalties yesterday. Sheed. It's vet players. Some of, I don't know, we don't like to always talk about pay as it relates to performance and all that kind of stuff, but realistically, a couple of your highest paid players are the ones that are screwing up these drives with penalties. So it's not like fringe guys. It's not even guys that you expect. It's not even like Sean Ryan at right guard. Nah, it's Elton at left guard. He's supposed to be the one that does screw up. So that's the thing. It's everything about the penalty picture right now. It just doesn't feel great for Green Bay. There's way too many penalties. They're happening on big plays, big moments. And it's who is committing them. And that, maybe even more so than the red zone offense, will eventually, against really good competition, or in January, hopefully in February, it's the kind of thing that can come back to bite them. It's early, plenty of time to fix it. But if you're looking at such a great performance yesterday, a double-digit win with your backup QB in, on the road, a great performance by the Green Bay Packers. Those are the 2 things that you look at and go, that's got to get better. That doesn't feel good. That's it. What did feel good was that victory yesterday. There is no doubt about that at all. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. I'll be back on Wednesday for LTB Live, and then, of course, the game preview on Friday for Packers vs. Vikings. But just a reminder, I did announce it a bunch on the watch party. Keep in mind, next Sunday for Packers Vikings, there is no watch party because that is my one annual game that I reserve to watch with my dad. I understand that doing this, there's only so many games left to watch with my dad, and I take one a year that's to reserve to watch with him like when I was a kid. So that's coming this Sunday. So, all right, everybody, thank you so much for joining me. Do hope you are enjoying this win, having a great Victory Monday. Hope you have a great week. I'll see you on Wednesday. And as always, go Pack, go.